Welcome to the DoD Contract Podcast, where we talk with businesses and subject matter experts that are selling to the U.S. government and the Department of Defense. We discuss strategies and tactics that are working for real businesses, as well as give you a real sense of how your tax dollars are at work with the small business contracts in particular. I'm Richard Howard, owner of DoDContract.com. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Air Force and former acquisitions officer for the Department of Defense. Now, quick question for you before we get into today's episode. Is there something you want to see on the show that I haven't covered? Is there a business that you'd like us to interview that you think would be a good guest, a technology area or industry that we haven't covered that may be involved with government procurement? If so, just leave your thoughts in the recommendations section. If you're listening to the podcast or if you're on YouTube, leave a comment and we'll take those. And this is how we actually develop a lot of our episodes. So your comments and suggestions mean a lot to me and to the other people that work on the podcast. You know, Govly is a very unique platform that you can use to find subcontracting opportunities, specifically in IT, cybersecurity. Govly is unique in the sense that you have a lot of prime contractors on there that are advertising that they need subcontractors. So if subcontracting is one of your pathways to selling to the government, and it probably is because it is for most companies, check out Govly. Today, we have a great episode. Andrew Everett, owner of Everett Management and IT Professional Services, is on. Now, I reached out to Andrew initially because I was looking at some of the contracts that you don't traditionally associate with defense contracting and government contracting, some of which we've talked about on past episodes, things like social media management. Who knew that the government pays for social media management? And they do. Religious services. Some of you may have known that, and we've had people on before talk about religious services, but I was looking through some of those unique services contracts, and Everett kept popping up. So I thought bringing Andrew on would be a great opportunity to talk about those. But what I discovered talking to Andrew is, I think a key to his success is that he is a people person and understands people. You know, you'll hear that he's not a business major, but a psychology major. He'll tell you he's a talker, and he is. But I really felt like he cared about talking with us on the podcast. I felt like he cares about the people that work for him at Everett, and I feel like he cares about the people in the government and the government mission. And when people believe you and trust you, that goes a long way. And I'm speaking as a former program manager. If I trusted the companies that were coming in talking to me, that went a long way as to whether or not I wanted them to be on contract with us. And I can tell just talking with Andrew that this is really one of the keys to his success. He's very much involved with landing the deals with his company. He knows what he's talking about, and I think you can learn a lot from him. So let's get going. On to Andrew Everett, owner of Everett Management and IT Professional Services. All right. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of DoD Contract Academy. I'm here with Andrew Everett, owner of Everett. Andrew, how are you today?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me, Richard. And it's been a good day so far.
Good. So now I reached out to you, Andrew, because you had some interesting contracts with the government. Contracts for different types of services, which some people have sent me questions about. That, I've been on other podcasts where people have asked about things like, social media and religious services, which may have been some of the earlier work that you've done. And I know that you now have a focus. You've done a few things, and you're looking at program management, some other areas. But so, from all accounts, this is a very successful company selling to the government, very successful small business. And so I wanted to get you on here. And first, I want to learn more about you, the owner. Who are you? Where are you from? Talk to us a little bit about that and where you went to school and stuff. And then maybe we can get into why Everett.
I'm originally from Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Went to school in Newport News, Christopher Newport University.
Oh, nice.
Highly recommend that university. It's a small school, but I feel like it's a perfect segue for small business, because if you're at a large business, you get lost in the mix. You're
Right.
just a number. Same thing with at a larger university. So I
Hmm.
feel like I was able to, you know, achieve and, make myself um, and kind of learn my way. I feel like I would have been lost in the mix at a much larger institution. So I double majored in psychology and sociology, which I feel like is 100% the the reason why, like, what I deal with, is dealing with people,
Sure.
government, and also employees, contractors, and how to balance that. Having that type of background, first understanding myself psychology wise, but then understanding groups of individuals, why there's certain trends, how to not get yourself stuck in a older area, because that's one of the biggest things I saw, even just growing up during that era, the early 2000s, millennial, grew up during the Facebook era. And you see all the companies that were thriving in the 2000s, majority of them are gone.
Yeah.
They're not in the, you know, um, top 50. That's one of the main reasons, it's Amazon, it's Google. None of those companies were even ranked. So that's where we were talking about agility, being able to adapt, being able to look at trends, see where things are going. Um, so
I think that's
I'm,
really smart. I think it's interesting too that you have a psychology degree and, from that background. And look, I don't know. I don't want to poo poo the, the
oh
business
yeah,
majors out there, but, sure, you can go to school to learn business. You can probably learn a lot of great things about accounting and whatnot, but the things have rapidly changed so much over the past 20 years that I'm not sure how valuable that is anyway, but B, having a skill set or, an interest area, whether it's a technology or another type of service, and being willing to go out and learn how things are really done, right?
yeah,
Like, typically you're not, like, I can tell you, I've been through plenty of government contract training, but learning how it's really done, there are very few courses, for instance, that could teach you that, whether it's in a school or anywhere else. And that goes for a lot of different things, right? I mean, kind of getting out there and getting your hands dirty and doing it. And I would imagine, like, psychology and, just like you said, having a positive attitude and being able to adapt
exactly.
is huge.
It's you know identifying, like you said, also understanding yourself, what motivates you, and then also what motivates others too.
So, what
Because
motivates
being a
you?
business owner, and I guess that's one of the things. I'm a talker, so I can talk. Some individuals don't want to talk as much, and that's one thing I work on is my listening skills, because I like talking so much. I think
Right.
everyone wants to hear me speak, and that's not necessarily the case. So, those are some of the things that you learn, just by kind of going through that. But speeding through that, after graduating college, I went and I did sales for a Xerox company.
Okay.
So business to business sales. And that was much harder than doing work with the government,
Ah,
because if you're not hitting your quota, you're gone. You
mm,
know, there's no playing around. There's no, you have 3 month training wheels where you can't get fired, but after that, they're constantly bringing in people in. And that was also at a time where multifunctional printers and copiers and all that stuff was a dying breed. I'm talking um, early to mid 2000s. People were getting printers, that desktop printers for $100. They were giving them out with laptops, HP, because no one wanted to pay 20, $30,000 for a big, huge, multifunctional, you know, printer. And basically, that's how a lot of organizations they spend all that money buying it. But it was a dying breed. They saw that they could save money by getting individualized printers for Susie or Bob, rather
right.
than getting a huge $30,000, $60,000 lease. And salespeople, like myself, we had quotas, and if you didn't hit those quotas, you're gone. So,
What did you learn in that environment? I bet you learned a lot about sales. A.
oh, well, that's actually how I ended up getting my first governmental job. Because I was very, I guess, extrovert. I always wanted to be outside. I never wanted to be inside, um, the office because I felt like I had to be the mayor of my, territory.
Right.
So I wanted to meet every single person. I always gave a business card because it's like you never know when you're going to have money. Something breaks down, whatever, referral. I went to every BNI, so I was always out there. I was like, I
Mhm.
want everyone to know me. So that's how I was noticing how to generate the leads. And I guess a lot of that kind of, segued into me getting recruited by this government contracting firm to be, a resource manager. And
Interesting. So were they a client of Xerox then?
no, actually, they weren't. They were actually a company I cold called in Herndon, Virginia.
Okay, interesting.
So,
So you cold called them. They obviously liked you, and then
right.
you went to work for them. So now you are working for you're a contractor essentially. For
No, I was actually, this company. So they were 100% a staffing firm. I don't know if you ever heard of Signature Government Solutions, but they got bought by Soterra Defense Solutions within about 10 years for $50
okay.
million dollars in cash. But they hired over 300 SCI and above personnel. So, um, it was a very flat, small organization.
Hmm.
And, as a resource manager, you were literally just, recruit, but it wasn't just recruiting. It was because you're dealing with individuals in a classified space. Those individuals aren't, you can't market your clearance on LinkedIn or whatever. That's a security violation. So you have to know those individuals. You have to build relationships with those individuals. And that was one of the things that I was constantly doing, meeting them out. Obviously there were some job boards that they could post on their resume and everything,
Yeah.
clearancejobs.com, others, etc. But meeting those individuals because they're getting calls from every other organization. Why would they not want to work? Why would they want to work for you? So that was where a lot of the desire to kind of do all what I'm doing came from, because it wasn't just a corporate job where you're calling people trying to recruit them. This
Right.
was you're actually making sure, and then not only when they're hired, you're making sure because we were getting paid, interestingly, you know, a percentage of, a percentage of what they were getting paid based off of how long they were working, etc.
Mhm.
So it was almost like we were our own entrepreneurs. We wanted to retain those individuals because the longer we retained them, the more reoccurring money. It wasn't just like a spot bonus type thing. So anyway, that company became a $500 million company through acquisitions and all that type of
Mhm.
stuff. I progressed within that organization, and at that point in time, that's when I decided to branch off and kind of start on my own, because I felt that, why not at that point in time? I wasn't at the time married. I am now. Didn't have any kids. I do have one on the way. So, um, it was at that point in time, I was like, okay, why not try this? If it doesn't work out, I can always go back and get hired by an organization.
Right. Well, it seems like things are working out for you. And there's a lot of different ways out there for anyone listening where you can look up, what companies are doing, and I don't want to necessarily get behind any of those tools right now, but I use a few different ones. You could also go to USA Spending if anyone wants to
Mm.
look up Evertech and see. But why don't you talk to me a little bit about, now you're getting out, you want to start your business. What were your initial thoughts for where you wanted to focus?
Um, Well, a lot of it, honestly, I couldn't really focus on the intelligence community because you have to have the facility clearance in order to get that. So you have to make baby steps. You got to get that initial facility clearance, in order to do the DoD work because it's not about your own personal clearance.
Mhm.
As an organization, that doesn't matter. And I see a lot of questions and answers. That helps if you're the owner to have a personal clearance, but it's not a facility clearance. So it's that chicken and the egg. And in order to do a lot of that DoD work, and I'm not even at the level that we want to from a facility. where there's a couple other, there's another level that we want to go up, you know,
Mhm.
but um, there's the chicken and egg because it opens up the opportunities. So I knew the DoD was the target market. Um, you know, uh, so that was kind of the main area:
Right.
Army, Navy, Air Force.
Okay, so you want to target the DoD, and you wanted, but what were the services that you wanted to perform? It was
Okay,
services,
so
right?
and I'll also take it back a step. One
Mhm.
of the other huge things because I obviously didn't serve, but majority of the individuals that I hired at my previous organization, I say almost it was up like 90+%, they were veterans.
Right.
And a lot of the reasons why I got referrals because when you treat individuals well, they're like, oh, hey, you know what? I actually work with so and so. They're either tired, getting out, and let me get you their number, let me get your contact information. Those individuals typically have security clearance in order to do that work. And that's one of the huge things within the DoD industrial base. They want to do. They want to return and hire veterans. They don't want to, they don't want to have to take a risk and hire a person that's completely green that doesn't understand the structure, doesn't understand chain of command,
Yep.
uh, and that throws off their environment. So I take that back a step. That was another huge reason why, from a targeting perspective, is
Yeah.
also I knew from who my connections are, relationship wise, and also who the government wants to retain. Um, DoD is the target market for
Yeah.
organizations.
Well, it also makes sense from a business perspective to hire veterans, or
Yes.
I think really a really great target is if you could find someone that is in the reserves or National Guard to potentially hire, because what you're getting is not only got it, you're helping vets, which kind of is patriotic and all that, but you're selling to the military. It A helps to have somebody that speaks the language, right?
Hmm.
B, they have networks, which you may or may not need, but still, it does help to know people, and they're also coming with a specialty
Yes.
potentially, and it may be aligned with what you're selling. They may be coming with a security clearance, and if they are in the Guard or
Yes.
Reserves, they are coming with a security clearance
Hmm.
that the government's maintaining,
Yes.
right? So you don't have to do that. There are just a lot of, and they're still connected. They're especially if they're in sales, and they're now not that they're using their government email to do any of that, but the fact that they're connected and that they're working in the government every day gives them kind of their finger on the pulse, if you will, of some of the
Yes.
that are going on. So
Yes. And that's one of the hugest things. Although I mentioned with agility, and I know that the government's, it's one of those buzzwords that's kind of like it irks some, but I think now it's one of those things where it's like, well, we have to be because, and we'll get to that probably a little bit later. Um, the biggest things is, like you mentioned, understanding that culture, understanding the nomenclature, understanding chain of command. Those are the most critical things, and it's a huge risk reducer when those contracting officers are looking and making evaluations. Oh, we see that you know you are you are trying to hire veterans for this support. You are trying to you're not just trying to go and seek someone else. You're not trying to waste time, and then because it's risk. They don't understand. They don't may not know those individuals, but if they do, that makes it less risky for them. And that's huge and critical. And I've been at these bases. It's not like I haven't been and haven't worked also as a contractor. So I know how the cores and um, the program managers they want to retain those individuals that have put in the work and then are getting out on the street and potentially struggling
yeah,
to find a job. They want to get those individuals and they're trying to find that vehicle um, and that's one of the things where for us from an organization, we're trying to fit that. And that's where, we do have huge initiatives and majority of our workforce, but if they weren't a previous veteran, retiree, they're military spouse because those are individuals that already have base access so they can immediately support some of those works. Like you mentioned for some of those earlier works. Um,
That
and
is really
helps
it's
them
really
to.
a good point, and it's something that, I haven't ta I don't think I've talked about that on the podcast, and I probably should. I definitely should, having a military spouse myself, all
Yeah.
right? The power of a military spouse, I would not that is not something to brush off. I mean, you're talking about, from a hiring perspective, you're talking about an individual that has got to, even without having a job, has got to tolerate and deal with um, some situations that most people just will never have to tolerate, right? Like having, if you have kids and your spouse is constantly being deployed, well, I can tell you, my spouse immediately became the person financially running our family,
Hmm.
responsible for everything the kids were doing and working at the same time, and
Yeah.
all of those things that were going up. In addition to that, they're tied into the base. They're on the bases all the time. They're working. They're networking a lot of deals. It's funny. I don't think I've ever talked about this. So a lot of deals have happened, whether we're talking about government contracting or just other things within the military, because one spouse talked to somebody else's spouse,
Oh, it's so true.
and
Yeah.
then, oh well, hey, I haven't thought about, because I'm going to listen to my director of operations, right? So you know it's a very powerful tool, and we're talking about some really smart, hardworking, tough women and men out there that have
Yes.
had to go through this. Very interesting that you bring up the spouses. Can we
And
back?
they're looking for those opportunities, and a lot of times, you know, they don't know the way, or it may be, because when you're there, when you're actually physically working in the building, you know, it's hard. You may know the organizations that may be potentially, but if it's a military spouse and they may not work in some of these facilities, they may not know which way or the access is. So, that's one of the main things where just, and a lot of it, I feel like, just because things evolving now more so because of obviously Indeed and all those other various different things now, it's now more spread out than what it used to be before, because it used to be hard to find these you actually have physically and all, but now you're much more presently seeing them during the time frames. And I think the organizations, they see the value because, like you mentioned, they understand all the stressors, they
Mhm.
understand the terminology no different, and sometimes,
Sure.
like you mentioned, even more,
Yeah.
because they have to deal with it all the time. It never leaves.
I've
So
literally been kicked out of rooms by spouses because we were talking too much in acronyms. In fact, so any of my military buddies come back around, and I'm always like, "Hey, I'm going to talk to them for a little bit, but as soon as you guys start talking in acronyms, I'm out of here." Hey,
it's
let's
so
back
cool.
up to. I just want to talk a little bit about your initial contracting efforts. Could you tell me a little bit about the first contract that you won and how you got it, and do you remember,
I
or
think
maybe
it
one of the
probably.
first ones?
Yeah, one of the first ones, it was probably just like, a full and open bid. I think a lot of them, I think a lot of small businesses only try to stay in their swim lane and look up for, things that are set aside for them. And that may honestly not be the best case. A lot of times, these full and open bids, there's not a lot of large businesses looking at them either because, Lockheed Martin, Leidos, they don't want to even get a because we're on some task orders with them, and they don't even want us to bring something to the table if it's not 15 million plus.
Yeah.
They're like, that's a waste of our time. You
Hmm.
know, so they're not even going to look at those opportunities if it's not steered or it's on a vehicle. So um, you just kind of have to look and open your mind a little bit more. I think for small businesses, so I think the first initial was a full and open opportunity, and probably not even that many organizations that bid it. And that was probably the reason why we won. But I think a lot of it is you have to get out there, you have to submit bids. Can't expect that someone else is going to submit that or we're not prepared. If you can provide that support service, then I think the one that we initially won, it was like a Key West, kind of like materials management support services contract with the Navy. Um, so and on it, and it was we had that's actually snowballed to a lot of Navy wins for us like later on in the future. So
Smart. So, kind of working after you got awarded, whether it was lucky or you guys wrote a great proposal or whatever it was, sounds like you did good work and you were rewarded with more work, right? And you
Oh yeah.
probably, I'm guessing, since you are a talker, which you mentioned, right, that you like to be out there. I'm assuming that you
Oh
spent
yes.
time talking with the CEO and the PM and the users, maybe people they were working with.
Prior to COVID, I was visiting every single contract physically. Not only to, because that was the exact same thing I had learned from previous. You always met. Now it's different. Now these bases are more locked down.
Mhm.
They don't want to meet you and majority of these individuals are working for from the government from home.
That's a really interesting point for people to consider if you're not aware. You're right. I mean, I still have a pretty large network in the military, both active and government civilian. Half the time I'm talking to them, the conversation is them at home,
Yeah.
not them in the office. So a lot of these bases are kind of ghost towns, if you will. Still, they're still not fully populated every day like they were pre-COVID.
Well, before COVID, the ideal was it's a joint community. We'll work at the bases, military, civilian, government, contractors, and everything. But now we don't only want the military and contractors at these bases, and the government civilians will work from home. And that's where I think there's got to be more agility, because you are losing from a government side some of that talent because
Yeah,
some of these operational duties and responsibilities from contractors don't necessarily need to be done, physically in
yeah,
person.
uh,
And
it's true.
figuring those things out, I think will lead to better production.
Yeah, um, I think they have a problem on their hands that they're trying to figure out, which is you have to attract great employees, right? Whether we're talking about the military or government civilian or contractors, we have to attract great people. We have to retain great people. And you also want to do that, especially in the military, especially if you're in a combat unit of any kind. You also want to be able to foster that esprit de corps, that sense of mission and urgency. And that's an interesting formula. Like how do you put all that together when you have some people working from home? Because I think that having people work from home, contractors or whoever, I think that's attractive to some people. It may enable them to bring in more qualified, capable people, but you might be losing a little bit of that esprit de corps that you get in the military and that morale, and especially in the DoD organizations, right? That you're going to get just by being around the mission, right? Whether you're a GS or
Sure.
active duty military or a contractor, right?
Yeah.
If you've seen any of that.
I've seen, it's been and I've seen a whole big transition because it's, during COVID, a lot of it was, everyone had to initially draw back in all of our contracts that we had in all the states. Everyone had to go and work from home. And then it was, okay, we're now going to go back onto, and, all my family, they're government employees. My father, government employee for the Federal Reserve. My sister, government employee for the Federal Reserve. And, kind of, it was interesting because they would try to incentivize Federal Reserve by like saying, "Oh, we're going to give you free lunch on certain days." Then I was like, I asked my sister, I was like, "How often was that working?" She was like, "It only worked initially." And then
Hmm.
people start figuring out like, I'd rather make my lunch and work from home than go and get a free lunch.
Yeah, get a free lunch. Yeah.
And it's like, and I completely understand because, um, and this is just from even a project management standpoint. There's some
Mhm.
duties and responsibilities I know that have to be physically done.
Sure.
Um, in the classified area, those type of duties, certain
Mhm.
meetings, you know, but somebody, if it's emails, if your duties aren't necessarily need to be done physically there, um, even for instance, like social media or something like that,
Yeah.
um, then there's going to be issues because that talent pool will say, okay, well, there's another job over here that will allow me to do my job this way, will save me all this money. And in this economy where everything's increased, um, people make judgment decisions based off of that. So I
Yeah.
feel like there's got to be some agility to that. Plus, not to mention the agility of, the government, they look at prices and it's all based off of historical prices. The historical prices used to work, pre-inflation. You know, you can't look at historical prices for houses and say, okay, that's what I'm going to get now. You
Yeah.
know, because it doesn't work. And also houses constantly go up, and that's why the government has to look at prices going up for even recompetes. You
Yeah.
know, um, I as a small business, it's I know the big thing, is the biggest hardest thing that I try to tell the government customer is, it's hard to, like outside of contract vehicles, and that's the reason why I really advocate for, small businesses to initially when they're starting, definitely get on, as many contract vehicles as a subcontractor, or be on a contract vehicle because that's where you can express the value. On these full and open bids that everyone else can see,
Yeah.
the government's looking for a price, and they're going to base that based off of the historical information,
Sure.
and that's currently the unfortunate thing.
So you say contract vehicles. So you and I know what that term is, but everybody listening isn't familiar. So why don't you describe in your own words what a contract vehicle is?
A contract vehicle is usually either an agency, like let's say, for instance, like the Navy, they have Seaport or DISA, they may have like Encore as their preferred vehicle for how they want to acquire certain types of services. And though they usually will have historical information of what type of services fall. It's called category management,
Hmm.
and this has been a huge thing the government's been trying to get. It makes it easier for them to um, procure, goods or services because it's saying, okay, these things fall in these categories. I buy things that fall in these categories from this, strategic sourcing vehicle.
Right.
The DHS, they have a lot. That's how they buy everything is through strategic sourcing vehicles,
Right.
IDIQs. And unless you're on that vehicle, you won't be visible to the government customer, or you won't see any of those opportunities.
It's interesting. There's and I'm partnered with this company now, but there's a company called partnered, not meaning I own part of the company, but that, we have a relationship and they're the only ones I do have a relationship with because kind of walking down this path, right? If you have, so category management and contract vehicles, pre-compete companies essentially in those categories, right? So if I probably used this analogy before, but if I'm running my acquisitions branch and we do a lot of cyber related efforts and I have a bunch of servers and everything, I know I'm going to have cybersecurity services to pay for over the next 3 years. I know that I can't predict everything that I'm going to need. And
Hmm.
we both know how long it takes to win some of these contracts, right? So from putting a solicitation out there, doing your market research, solicitation, get it out there, get all the responses, review them to award, that could take 12 months. That could take 18 months. In some cases, it takes longer, just depends on the size and everything. So there's a way of doing that. I pre-compete it fast, maybe 200 companies, takes me a year and a half, but I get 20 companies on there or however many there are. Now we'll call it the Ricky Howard contract vehicle. Now I have this contract vehicle and I could put you on contract really fast. I've already competed it. I still might have a small competition, a small fast one amongst the businesses on there, but I don't have to put that on sam.gov necessarily. I can go out and it is extremely important. I think you make a good point having multiple ones because different offices like to use different vehicles, right? Like
Yes.
I never used a GSA. It's not because I had any problem with GSA. It's just we had other vehicles in place that were very convenient for us. We used them all the time. And those are the ones that we wanted to use. And
The
I
big
think I
one right
saw,
now is Oasis, and you know, like us right now, we're unfortunately not going to be able to be a prime, but
mhm,
that's one of the huge things as a subcontractor. We're trying to position ourselves to be on a team with that, that can win a bunch of task orders
and
because
Oasis is a services contract. Is that
yes,
correct? Okay.
it's a GWAC, so it's a
Hmm.
government wide acquisition contract. So it's not specific to one particular agency. It's they now, the government. This is where I say they're at agility. You know, now a huge buzzword is best in class for these
Hmm.
contract vehicles. So even if an agency has a contract vehicle where they can get those cybersecurity services, like you were mentioning,
Yeah.
they can look and see. Oh, okay, hold up. GSA has this acquisition vehicle called Oasis. which is technically a best in class, which they means that they had a higher threshold and standard for the
Mhm.
primes to meet to be on it. Um, and probably also better pricing and all that stuff for the government and
It's a
administration fees and
that's a
stuff.
great point. I mean, you keep hitting it right out of the ballpark because we use other agencies' contract vehicles all the time, all the
Mhm.
time. Now, GSA applies to everybody, right? But like NASA Soup has NASA in its name. But if you go and look at who NASA, and I've used it, so you can look at who they've Air Force, Army, people
Yes.
use NASA Soup. It just needs to fit within their category.
Hmm.
Often we'll just go and say, hey, do you have ceiling on the contract vehicle? And as long as they have ceiling, and those are huge GWACs, like you call them, right? I mean,
Hmm.
they're huge. There's usually hundreds of companies on them, and the ceilings are astronomical, and they get recompeted every couple of years. But another thing about those vehicles that you mentioned, which is something that you need to consider if you're listening to this, is that let's say there are NASA Soup and NXG and Seaport opportunities that are going to go out to only those contract holders, right? The primes on there. Often the opportunities will not go out on a sam.gov. So the only way to know about them is to either be on the contract vehicle as a prime or sub, have a relationship with a prime where they might let you in on that. Or when I was talking about Govly, this is really where this is like the longest way of getting back to that. But
Yeah.
Govly, anyone could check it out. You could check it out. What they have is a place where the primes, and it's mainly around cybersecurity and IT related, but primes and subs will be on there, and those companies will put, hey, these are opportunities that are coming to us. You're probably not going to see them from a sam.gov or from whatever research tool you're using, but it is a way for a small business to see, okay, what is coming out on these vehicles. So if you're interested in that, you can check Govly out and um, just to be aware of, okay, well, maybe here are some of the opportunities that are out there, and look at that as a possible avenue.
Yes, and that's as a small business, you have to be really good if you're trying to succeed. On like if you're trying to just initially get there, you have to really be exceptional, or at least just the SAM. Like that's what I call like the simple, because because if you can't get that right, then even if you have access to all these other vehicles where you're trying to search for opportunities and find your niche, you're just going to get lost there too. So you have to be able to kind of first start off, get that, understand like, okay, where's my target here? Can I see these opportunities? Can I respond to these sources, thoughts? Can I get it there? Okay, because then that's okay, I made it here. Now I can deal with next gen. I can deal with NASA Soup. And, then that leads because when you look at a lot of these mid-tier like mid-size more I'm not saying like the Lockheeds or
Yeah.
Leidos, Northrops, um but the mid-tier smalls,
Hmm.
they've killed those vehicles like in a good way because they understand how to really just make the snowball effect and just make it rain, and they
Yep.
they they get a whole once it's a proof of concept with one, then it all comes through because everyone's like, hey, one come all.
Yep.
So
Got to get your foot in the
that's where they
door.
mature out of those vehicles and a lot of those areas, and that's where we're trying to get. You know,
Let me talk to you about your business development strategy and your kind of philosophy, because it's obviously changed over the years. And we can see, when I look through some of your contracts, I see things like health services administrator, services for social media, administrative clerk, administrative assistants, library so a lot of different things. But then as you start progressing, now the focus on things like program management becomes more important, I guess, to you and your organization. But so I guess there's two things I want to talk about: the progression from going to some of these different areas to a more focused, hey, this is what we want to offer the government. But also, you also mentioned, hey, we probably want just a openly competed solicitation. What was the progression going from that to your business development strategy now, right? And you've talked around a lot of that, but I'd like to hear where you're at now, and as far as this is how we target an organization, this is how we find opportunities, this is how we influence. Like, what are you doing, what's working for you right now?
well, I feel like the best thing was working the best is responding to as many of these sources on as pre-solicitations because you have to have these, you know, the government doesn't know you're just listed on SAM, the government doesn't know who you are. They will never know who you are, and they won't, they're not going to find you. That's not expecting them they're going to find you. So a lot of my day is, another podcast I hugely highly recommend is Game Changers Government Contracting,
Hmm.
Michael Lejeune. Um, I think I was also on that one as well. But
Okay.
also his book is huge and critical. I also recommend that. But you have to get out there. You have to market to these agencies a lot. You
Yeah.
have to have your capability statement ready to go with your listed um, contracts, past performance. Past performance is key. Within the government, you always hear that past performance. I don't care what the past performance is. It could be, picking up gum. But if you have past performance for picking up gum, it shows that you were good at picking up gum. That's
Yeah.
fine. You need to have someone that's going to say that you're a reputable organization. You can't. There's so many like small businesses I had met that were early on that never really got anywhere, and a lot of it was because you know they were like, "Oh, well, we're too niched." You know, you have to evolve. Like we just recently, we're doing some environmental services. You know, you have to evolve. You have to understand that there's areas and support that the government is going to need.
Yep.
If I, that if you can find, and a lot of it, my background is personnel management solutions. The whole entire everything within the organization is finding a solution for the agency. The government's looking for a solution, and our organization is there to provide that solution, whether it's through people, whether it's through technology, whether it's through product. We're there to provide that. There's other various different efforts that don't even get listed
Yeah.
in those various databases that we provided contracts and support services. And that's
Sure.
just because not everything is always listed, but
Yep.
um,
True.
you have to have that you know under like I guess business development background to think, okay, well, I don't have to be too niche to say, okay, this is not something that I may pursue because during this era where so many various different procurements are being
Hmm.
delayed, we've had so many various different contracts that we are current primes on that like everything is delayed. Whether you're getting your follow on, whether you're getting everything's delayed, and it's because, like I mentioned, a lot of the government they're working at home. They don't have visibility of what's happening on site. They're expecting the contractors to have their own visibility of what's happening, and that's at every agency.
Yeah.
Uh, so um, understanding that a lot of the administration is being delayed, you can't expect that these forecasts are up to date. They're going
No.
to be coming out on time. So submitting a ton of sources thoughts,
So
pre-solicitations.
you've said that a few times, and I mean I've done entire episodes on this. So if anyone wants to check it out, I don't want it to be a sources sought total discussion because we're almost out of time, and I have a few really key things I want to ask you. But really quickly, value of responding to a sources sought, in your opinion,
Huge. We've won contracts from a source thought. You're only going to get.
sole source contracts.
Yeah, well, not only that, but it's like the government wants to make it easy, especially towards the end of the fiscal year. They don't want to have to write a full RFQ, RFP. They just want to just throw something out there, an idea. It's like who can provide this, and then they're the only ones going to be discussing it with you. So if you don't respond to that source thought, expect to not see anything more from that at all.
This
It could go
psychology
to
degree of
legal.
yours, I think, really, I think, really paid off for. I mean, you're 100% right, and that's you're also pre-solicitation for everyone listening. So I always say, once the solicitation comes out, the handcuffs are on.
Yeah,
The contracting officer, the program manager, they're not talking to you. If you ask a question, it's probably going to be answered publicly. But before that, it's hey, it's the research phase. It's what can we
yes.
do? So you are doing exactly what you should be doing, and it's
Get your
probably why you're so
information out to them.
successful.
Get your capability statement out to them. Even if you're not even going to bid it, you know, that's one thing where I'm like, why not? Even
Yeah.
if it's something that I'm not bidding, boom. Sorry, you got a capability statement, boom, pre-solicitation, because then they know your name, your company. They're like, oh, you know, and then it's like, oh well, I'm just it's one of those things because there might be something else. You have to get that information out to them.
Who writes your sources sought? Do you write them yourself? Do you have staff that do that for you?
We have some individuals that also help, but predominantly I handle the sources sought. You know, I mean, I have so many various templates. A lot of these things you want to make it easy. You
You
know,
do.
you
Yeah.
want to have a 3 page, you want to have a 5 page, you want to have a 10 page. Those are typically the amount of pages. You and you kind of know what the answers and the common questions that they're going to ask. So
Hmm.
you want to have those, and then you just do a quick little tailoring. Um, but you don't want to spend hours on sources sought or pre-solicitation responses. It's quick, boom. I just want to get this information out to you.
Yeah, no, really smart. And I think, you mentioned it. You've won contracts from submitting because most companies are not submitting the sources sought. Most companies are going to go after the solicitation because that's where because usually at the end of a sources sought, it doesn't necessarily equal a contract for you. It could 6 months from now, right? Or it could 4 months from now. But what it does, if it doesn't equal that, it can in some cases, but it can be your foot in the door with a meeting with the program manager. It automatically tells them who you are. It
Yes.
You can influence, you can recommend, you can put anything into a sources sought, right? Hey, if I'm 8A, I recommend you do this 8A. By the way, you can give me a sole source contract because I'm 8A. Or hey, I'm not 8A, so I recommend you make this small business a set aside only, right? Or whatever it is that you are. Use these certifications. Um,
This is one quick
Anything.
thing I'll say because my sister, she works at Google and she
Mhm.
works in their ad department, and she's been trying to sell me for years for like Google ads. And I'm like, I'm not going to waste my time with that because the government's not going to look me up on Google. The only way that the government's going to have my information is if I submit a sources on or submit information, capabilities, show up at an industry day, those various different ways, like those, a lot of these virtual industry days that are happening, signing up for almost every single one of them, because that's how these government agencies, even if you don't attend, get the information of like, you know, who's potentially, and then a lot of times they'll send you sometimes because of OPSEC, they might send you a slideshow.
Yeah.
But you want to make sure that you signed up for those.
And that gives you information that other people don't have, right? So you're now by the time you get to if it is going to be competed, you've submitted a sources sought, you've probably influenced the solicitation. I know some companies that write the solicitation for the government, by the way, and just send it
Hmm.
in. And it's a lot of work for the government. So depending on
Yeah.
who you get, that might be but you also, if you get the meeting, you know more about it than which allows you to write a better proposal than somebody that hasn't had that meeting. Or now you have the meeting, the relationship, you've written a better proposal, you're more likely to win. This could go on for another hour very easily because I'm enjoying the conversation. But I wanted to know a couple things really quickly before we close. One, what's in store for you and your business going forward, aside from your focus on program management and just providing value to the government? And then maybe concluding with what would your advice be to a small business that's just getting started in government contracting?
All right. So I first start with the advice piece. Um, for a small business just getting started, I'd say the biggest thing is focusing on those sources thoughts, getting a template out, a capability statement, listening to podcasts like yourself, game changers for government contracting, reading information. Knowledge is key. You know, without gathering that knowledge, it's going to be hard. Um, learning some of the basics of program and project management, I think that's a huge critical thing for the government because it's a big risk for the government to also trust a new organization to run a project if they don't understand the principles of project management. The government does not want to see, contracts fail. So um, having some of those things mitigated. I'm not saying that you have to get PMP certified, but just having some of those foundational understandings, it also helps you tailor some of those proposals. A lot of that language is critical. So having that will help you a lot responding to the source of sides. What's happening for us as a business going forward? Cloud services is an area that I've been, individually training myself. AWS, um,
Mhm.
it's just got trained on solution architecture during this last year,
Okay.
and because that's a huge area. Everything is from everything is not being done physically. It costs too much. Things get outdated. You want to it's all cloud. Everything's cloud. Email, everything. The government's been on. They've all migrated to the cloud. So that's the area that we're trying to focus in on, um, getting out of some of those earlier phases, administrative. Those are good introductions into doors into those offices where you can meet a lot of those key individuals that make decisions. Um, but focusing into you know the the program project management, agile, um, and then also the cloud services. Those are the area, because that's the infrastructure that's the backbone for everything right now.
Really is. There's a big transition happening right now, and there's a lot of there's
I
concern and there's opportunity, right? And
mean,
we've
you
done
think about
episodes.
it, Amazon, their biggest, it's not their sales that they have from selling everything that you can basically get anything from. It's their cloud services that's making the majority of Google, and everything is on the cloud.
Yeah,
Um,
Microsoft has
yes,
Azure
I mean
too. Yeah,
everything. It's all as a service. So being able to understand it, me from a business standpoint, that was huge and critical, because that was the area and market that I wanted to transition. Kind of seeing those trends, seeing those areas. My father, he was telling me, like, because he's been in the federal IT print division of and he had been telling me for years, Amazon, Amazon. So that kind of was, where a huge, huge area of focus is going to be cloud program management,
yeah,
and then obviously still supporting the DoD on mission critical support services, but
right.
um, following where I feel like the mission, the need is, and I think with you see all these meetings, even this, um, majority of the meetings that even the government wants to have are going to be through Teams or Zoom. They're not going to want to do in person. So
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there's a ton of opportunity out there for cloud. A lot of problems to solve, a lot of big problems to solve. I'm glad you're focused there. And I apologize, my alarm went off and
no,
was
you're
probably on the Zoom call. And I don't know if you guys heard my kids screaming upstairs during our snowstorm, but look, Andrew, it has been awesome having you on the podcast. Congratulations on your upcoming addition to your family, by the way.
fine.
So
Thank you.
wanted to make
We'll be
sure
here
that.
next month. So yeah,
Oh, that is awesome. Well, your world is just about to get that much better. So,
much
um,
appreciated.
I wish you the best of luck. Thank you for what you're doing for the country. And
Yes,
also, by the way, we talked about a few podcasts. Another one that's really good is the Contracting Officer podcast. I want to say it's called.
yes.
Really
I
great.
listened to that one as well.
Yeah, that's really good if you want to understand the FAR. Those guys are really well researched, and if you want to really have some deep understanding of the regulations, that's a really good one. So, thanks for coming on. You have given a lot of great advice for the businesses out there. In the show notes for everyone listening, I'm going to put a link to Andrew's LinkedIn account and his website so you can learn more about him. And if you want to connect with him, you can do so there. And if you have any questions, you can head over to dodcontract.com and you can request a consultation. We have some great information on there that's free that you can look at. Check out our other podcast episodes, leave a review, subscribe. Andrew, thanks again for coming on. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Hopefully we'll get a follow-up maybe a year from now and see how you're crushing it.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Like I said, once again, and like I said, I'm glad for what you're doing, being able to just help this community and everything. And also thank you for your service. It's a huge value, and trust me, we need more individuals like yourself. So I appreciate everything that you're doing for the country.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I really do appreciate that. Thanks again. Thanks for everyone listening, and we will see you next time.